I worked in an office for about 4 years with a friend of mine named Pat. He was a co-author on a couple of the books that I published or had published. Anyway, he was hysterical, funny, and irritating. He loved to talk about oneness, the oneness of everything, which is fine for about 20 minutes, but then he wanted to talk about love and how he loved everybody, and he did. We had this wonderful mailman. Oh, he wasn't wonderful. He was just a guy. He was tall and bald and skin the color of coffee, and his name was Perry. He would come in every afternoon, like they do, with mail, and we would go, "Hey, Perry," when he came in the door, and he would smile and give a little salute, and then when he left, Pat would call out from his desk, "I love you, Perry." And Perry would kind of like shake his head a little bit, half smile, give a little salute. And I'd be like, "Pat, what do you mean you love Perry?" He would say, "Well, you know, I have warm feelings for him, and I wish the best for him, and when he's right here, I feel warm feelings for him, and I would keep his secrets unless telling them would get me a laugh in a crowd." And so when he'd say, "I love you, Meg," I would say, "Yeah, you love Perry. I mean, you love..." So then he took a great big sheet of paper, and with an orange Sharpie, he wrote all the reasons why he loved me in alphabetical order. You gotta love that. And I loved him too, but I had always thought that love, I don't know where I got this idea, but I think it comes from the culture, that love means that you put the other person's needs above your own. And so I was pretty parsimonious with my love. I had 2 small children, and I loved them. I would certainly put their needs above my own. And but, you know, if it came down to me or Pat, it would have to be me. Sorry. And so I guess I carried this idea about love being a zero-sum kind of element. And then I started thinking about it again, years later now, because a little book dropped into my life. I was in the bookstore and looking through books, you know how you do. And I found this tiny little book called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I think that's what it's called. And it's by a very OCD Japanese woman who loves tidying and writes well. And she says things like, "Tidying must be done all at once, not little by little, otherwise it won't get done. And do not adjust this method for your personality. Do it the way I said do it." So she reminded me of my family. And part of what I loved when I was holding the book in my hands was that she was talking about her socks. And she said, "Don't just knot your socks together in the drawer. They've worked hard. And when you take them off your feet, think about how hard they've worked bearing your weight between your foot and your shoe, and throw them gently in the washing machine. And when you take them out again, put them together in your drawer in some way that looks restful for them so they can rest." And I was charmed by that idea. And I thought, wow, though, that would be exhausting, treating everything as if it were alive. Being grateful to everything, thank you to everything. But I thought I was charmed enough to try a thought experiment. So a few weeks ago, I started. And the first thing, of course, I said thank you to was the coffee pot. Because coffee. And I even bowed a little bit in the morning. I was just like, "Thank you, coffee pot, for my..." And I thanked the beautiful pink tulips that were on the kitchen table. And I eyed my socks, but I was like, "Thank you, socks, for all your hard work." And then they told me clear as day that they did not mind being knotted up in the drawer because that was easiest for me and they loved me, and so I just didn't change anything about that. So as it turned out, thanking was not a zero-sum activity. The more I thanked things, the more thankfulness I felt inside, which was lovely. And so it's not a zero-sum like love. But then I thought maybe love is like that too. I mean, I'd heard people say the more you give, the more you have. And I was aware of that in the back of my mind, but I had not found that to be true. And I thought, you can't love everything like you can thank everything. It's all right, but loving everything, putting everything's needs above your own. And then I thought, wait a minute, I don't believe that anymore. So sometime in the intervening time, I stopped believing that love meant putting others' needs above your own, because I was in a love relationship where my needs and her needs are negotiated on almost an hourly basis, and I'm happiest when she's happy, and she's happiest when I'm happy, and so we kind of work together for each other's well-being. And I thought, that question of whose needs get put above the other doesn't even really come up, at least not for me. Maybe she's doing all of it. That would be terrible. And I thought, that idea, I asked her, I said, where do you think that idea that love means putting others' needs above your own, where do you think that comes from? And she said, I think it comes from Christianity. And I said, no, it does not come from Christianity. I know the Bible better than anybody else I know. And it's not in there. That is not in there, put other people's needs above your own. It's just not there. And there are many passages about love, the most famous of which is 1 Corinthians 13, or as Donald Trump, who loves the Bible, would say 1 Corinthians 13. It's a very famous passage, and it's read at many weddings, and it goes like this. Love is always patient and kind. It is never jealous. Love is never boastful or conceited. It is never rude or selfish. It does not take offense, and it is not resentful. Love takes no pleasure in other people's sins, but delights in truth. It is always ready to excuse, to trust, to hope, and to endure whatever comes. I think loving like that would take toughness and commitment, and I think as a definition of what love is, it works pretty well. I can't go all the way with it, with that last endure whatever comes. I worked with battered women for a long time in South Carolina, and they would come to my office and go, yeah, well, I'm supposed to endure whatever comes, the preacher said. And I thought, no, we're not talking about being hit over and over again, no. But the rest of it is something that you can really use to see if you're loving somebody right and if they're loving you right. And so I think the idea of putting others' needs above yourself, which makes love kind of onerous, comes from a medieval idea of courtly love. That's my current thought. Because the knights in the medieval time, the writers, they said, this is the beginning of romantic love, actually. They said, love is an ideal. You feel noble, and you do tasks for the other person and go on quests for the other person. And if you're on a quest for somebody on their behalf, it necessarily kind of means that you don't spend a lot of time with them. And so your idealized love can remain idealized, and it's kind of all on you. You have your love, I love you, and you're far away from me, and I don't even really know you that well, but I have this ideal love, and I'm just kind of shining it on you like a beam, and you consent to take it, my beam of love, or maybe you don't even know about it, but I'm doing this quest on your behalf, and that's not real love. So I think real love doesn't mean putting somebody else's needs above your own all the time. Of course, you have to sometimes. When you're a mom or a dad, you have kids, their needs come before yours sometimes. But sometimes it's mom and dad's turn. And you say, it is time for bed. Mom and dad have to talk or eat ice cream or watch TV. and you have already been up asking for a glass of water 3 times, and that is enough. Real love has to do with a day-to-day negotiation of whose needs take precedence, and it needs to be mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial. So it's true for partners, and it's true for parents with kids, and it's true for friends. But we only use one word, love, in English. We use one word most of the time. And so we can scorn ourselves, or some people are cynical and they go, oh, you say you love me, but you also love Fruit Loops cereal. And so what does that mean? And so we need more words, because we use love, like I love going to the movies, and I love West Texas, and I love my partner, and I love raisins and whatever. So in Greek, you all know this already, there are 4 different words for different kinds of love. The first one is agape, which is used in the Christian scriptures to describe God's love for humanity, or humanity's love for God. It's a huge, unconditional kind of love. In the Greek culture, it was also used for lovers, and it's, and I was driving across country listening to a preacher on the radio, because it was Kansas, and that was the only station that came in, and he said, the highest kind of love is agape. Like you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, just agape. And I thought, well, that kind of works. The second kind of love is eros, the root of erotic. Eros is usually used to talk about a sexualized love, a passion, the kind where you're just engulfed and stunned by beauty and desire. It's not always for lovers, though. It can be used for art or dance or music or beauty of nature. Sometimes when you're just transported and you feel lit up and stunned by desire to stay in this moment with this beauty. Like when we have these musicians here, that feeling of being lifted up, you could use a couple of these love words for that. Philia is affection between equals. A gentle affection like you would feel for a friend or a coworker that you get along with really well. In the town I grew up in, Philadelphia, it's called brotherly love, but it's kind of like that, but it's also just friendly, respectful love between equals. And you can also use it for the affection you feel for hiking or riding your bike, and it just means a gentle kind of, ooh, I really love this. And there's a fourth one that almost nobody ever talks about, and it's because it's so kind of dull. It's called storge, and storge, I don't know why I pronounce it like that. That's how you have to say it, I think, because it has the whiff of putting up with in it. Storge is a love where, she's my mother, and I love her. My brother-in-law has a mother like that. She's great, but she talks constantly, cannot stop talking. And we were all in a Cracker Barrel one morning, and there was this guy at a table over there, and he was listening on the phone like this. Yeah, Mama. Yeah, Mama. And one time he just put the phone down and ate some more of his breakfast. So we're leaving the restaurant, and Rick goes, "What are you doing talking to my mother?" So I no longer believe that I have a limited amount of love to give, and I'm willing to try a thought experiment of loving now that I know it doesn't really mean putting everybody else's needs above my own all the time. I can love the mailman, I can love my friends, and I can love everybody I meet. But really, at about 6:30 last night, this is where the sermon ended. And I would say, well, so I'm just going to try a thought experiment and love everybody. And then I just thought, this is just boring to me. You don't want to bore yourself. And we would end in a little pink candy hearts mood, and I would be a sweet, earnest minister, which God knows I try. But it was depressing because lack of truth is depressing. And so I thought, what is the truth? What is the truth here? And the truth is that real love is hard. It's heartbreaking. You love a friend or a child or a sister or brother. You worry if your love is enough for them. You worry whether you are lovable enough, and maybe they're just fooled into thinking you are. You worry about messing up the relationship or being messed up by it. You worry because your loving them doesn't seem to be enough to make them stop drinking or taking the pills. It's not enough to keep your children always safe. Having real relationships means being willing to talk in an open-hearted way with someone who could reach in and break you. It means if you're really wanting to make a connection, letting go of your angry story, or letting go of your righteous victim story, or letting go of your sarcasm and ironic remove and how little you care. And it means struggling to understand them before they understand you, and it means saying what you say you'll do and trusting them to do that. And if they don't, or if they love the bottle more than they love you, it means making a hard decision about whether to end the relationship. And real love, even if it ends, it's always, part of it is always there, even though you've withdrawn from the relationship because it was wrecking you. And it doesn't mean that it never was any good. Some people, when they leave, they'll say, I never loved you at all. That is not true. And sometimes you feel like, am I lovable? If your parents couldn't love you or didn't love you or couldn't express that they loved you, sometimes as a child you tell yourself the story, I'm just unlovable, I guess. But it's not true. None among us is unlovable. And loving children is really scary because it always seems like your children are walking down a road next to a forest, and there's a tiger in the forest, and every now and then the tiger reaches out and grabs one child. An addiction or physical illness or an accident or mental illness just grabs them and takes them to a place you can't reach them, and there's nothing you can do, and loving is not going to fix it. It's terrifying. Sometimes Unitarian Universalists declare that love will fix everything. Somebody did something bad just because nobody loved them enough. But everybody who's loved an addict and everybody who's loved someone who their love wasn't enough for knows that love doesn't fix everything. And our hearts are broken. And by the end of our lives, they've been broken many times. And if your heart gets broken, it doesn't mean you did something wrong. It just means you're alive and life is happening to you. And that is good. And by the end, if it gets broken enough times, it might be tenderized. So you'll be tender and scarred, but alive inside. And I'd like to end with a piece of a book called The Painted Drum by Louise Erdrich. Life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that, and living alone won't either, for solitude will also break you with its yearning. You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason you're here on earth. You are here to risk your heart. You're here to be swallowed up. And when it happens that you are broken or betrayed or left or hurt or death brushes near, let yourself sit by an apple tree and listen to the apples falling all around you in heaps, wasting their sweetness. Tell yourself you tasted as many as you could.